Hello, this is Dr. Jack Wolfson, board certified cardiologist, and welcome to another episode of The Healthy Heart Show. And today I have Lierre Keith. And Lierre is an author that I read several years ago. And I saw this book at my local bookstore. And it said, The Vegetarian Myth. And I said, that is a book that I have to read because it's packed full of story. It's packed full of information. It's packed full of data. And I couldn't wait to bring the author of that book onto my show. So, Lierre, welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
Tell me kind of, some of the backstory on that book. Obviously, you spent 20 years as a vegan. Tell me, what got you into veganism, and then how did you eventually get out of it?
Sure. So I became a vegan in the way that most people become a vegan, which is I knew somebody who was a vegan. And that's the number one route in, is that you have a friend, a colleague, somebody at work, whatever, who is a vegan and presents you with information that seems unassailable. And if you're, a thinking, feeling person, you go, wow, animals are being tortured. This is really horrible. And then you look into it. And a lot of times you're convinced that this is a good thing to do. I was only 16, so I didn't have any counter information to this. And you also have to remember this was long before the internet. So I really had no way to find out whether or not this might be, a good way to address these problems or a bad way to address these problems. I only knew that these were terrible problems. So there was, another teenage girl, her family they were all vegans. They were all really into it. And within 2 weeks of her, giving me her sort of initial spiel into this, I was just utterly convinced that this was it for my life. So
Were you having any health issues at the time? I mean, so you said you're a 16-year-old girl.
No.
You get presented this information. So it wasn't for health reasons. Maybe it was for health prevention. But it was
it was for that. It was for that. There was a lot of people in my family have diabetes, heart disease, alcoholism, like this whole sort of collation of things. And I remember, that was 1980 or something. I remember learning in health class. This is just when they had started like the whole food pyramid, low fat, all that. And I remember the health teacher explaining to us that eating full fat dairy was going to give us all heart disease. Like, this was state education, this public school, that's what we were told. And even him saying it was like, oh, I can feel it. I can feel my arteries clogging from, the whole milk that I drank this morning, and thinking about all the people in my family who had heart disease and diabetes. I was like, I've got to do something about this while I'm still young. So that definitely was a motivating factor, but it wasn't the main motivating factor. It was there. But that's the thing about this sort of vegan worldview, is that, this one simple act, you can cure all these problems: your health, the terrible things that are happening to animals, human injustice, world hunger, global warming. You're going to solve it all just by doing this one thing. So it's a complete package. And, it seems to make sense if you don't know better. I'm listening. My dog wants to go outside, so I'm just going to step aside for 1 second, but you can keep talking.
No, sure.
Go ahead, Mike. Okay. All right. She's gone.
Just letting the dog out. Hey, listen, the dog's got to go out, right?
Well, she's going to keep scratching until I let her out. And so, and the other dog is...
Now they're trashing the food, and then you're sending me the bill and stuff like that. Oh, what a gorgeous doggy.
Dog number 2 goes to be outside all the time, so I just let her out. Dog number 2 will stay here and get petted. Okay. So anyway, yes, they hand you this whole world, and it's so easy. You just do this one thing, and you'll save it. You'll fix it all, everything that's wrong. So I did it.
Okay. So we'll fast forward, obviously 20 years, you're feeling lousy. When did you come to the realization? So from a health point, you're realizing it's not for you, but when did you start waking up to the fact that maybe plowing over millions of acres in Illinois to plant soy and corn in Iowa and Nebraska, that's maybe not so good for the environment?
So that was a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance that I lived with for that whole 20 years. I was somebody who was very, very concerned about, the state of the planet, really since I was a tiny child. I remember being 4 years old and just being so upset at everything that I saw around me. Like, why aren't there trees? Why aren't there wolves? Where are the deer? I've read about these things in books, and I just had this, it was my whole inner reality was like, why can't I find this place that we should be, which involves all the wild that we're supposed to be a part of, and it was all just gone, and it was cement and highways and just horrible stuff. And I think a lot of children feel that. If we feel that loss, we feel that loneliness. And for whatever reason, I didn't numb myself to it. So my whole, up until through my teen years, I just felt that so strongly. And that didn't stop, it's like, so then I became a vegan. So I'm still trying to figure out, well, why did we destroy the planet? Like, what sense does this make? When did it start? What's the problem? How did we do this? Why did we think this was a great idea? And so even through all my vegan years, I think that I've found, the answer to all this, but all my reading, all my studies, even my own experiments with gardening, I could see that this was not actually true. But I couldn't really engage with that information. It was like I was on two tracks, because the vegan ideology said, this can't be true. Like, agriculture can't be the problem, it's the solution. So you're in this real bind when you're a vegan, because I think most people who take this up really do care about the planet. I think they care tremendously about animals. And when you try to point out, well, actually, agriculture is the most destructive thing people have done to the planet. We've wiped out 98% of the habitat of all animals. This can't actually be a solution. And I know what that's like. You don't want to hear it, because no, this is how we're going to solve the problem. It can't be the actual problem. So I lived with that for 20 years. And I would say the one good thing about, when it all collapsed for me, one good thing was that I was finally able to absorb all that information that I had been, sort of backpiling over here. And I was like, okay, I can actually look at this now. I don't have to be afraid of it anymore. Really, I can see that agriculture is, the root of the large amount of the problem that we're living with. So that became easier, not harder. A lot of other stuff was harder first, but that was right away easier. It's like, oh, thank God, I can finally just say out loud, yes, this is not a solution. But that was hard. So I get it when vegans don't want to hear it. It's like your ideology is really in the way of facts, and like, reality is going to win, but it's not easy.
Yeah. Was there any blowback from the vegan community from your book? How because I know, there are some people, I guess I would call them friendly vegans, and I don't mean to insult all these people out there. It's just, and listen, and I love animals. You're a dog lover, obviously. I'm a dog lover. We're big animal supporters, donators to rescues and stuff like that. But, I guess fundamentally we're talking about the best way to live and the best health foods, and to me, our ancestral diet. But not all vegans, of course, would agree, and some are militantly pro-vegan. And, I think in a lot of ways, and I think you document this in the book too, is that these people actually value animal life more than they do human life. Is that true?
I think they're in a bind. I think that it's, they'll make strange arguments like, well, if a child was drowning and a dog was drowning, I don't know who I would pick. Would I pick the dog or the child? And I think that's just silly. Yeah. I mean, I think we all know we would pick the child, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love my dogs above pretty much everything, but we know what we would pick. It's right. Just, and that's fine. Like, every species is allowed to value its own. It's the young, especially. Like, if we don't have a built-in fail-safe to protect the young, like, we are never going to survive. Like, that has to be a thing that we have as a species, especially as humans, because our young are dependent for so long. Like, that has to be a really core thing, just in our makeup, physically, emotionally, whatever, like, to take care of the young. Yeah. So they get themselves into these corners where they make these sort of ridiculous, sort of hyperbolic situations, which no one is really ever going to face. But I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, and what you will see over and over, with a lot of vegans is, people like me who come forward and say, look, I gave it my all. I was the best vegan, that you could ever have been. I was so pure. I was so strict. I barely cheated. It was like, like every 2 years I'd eat a piece of cheese and feel horrible about it. But they don't want to believe that our health failed. And you'll say, look, these are the things that happened to me. This damage is permanent. This is what's going to happen to you. I can guarantee you're going to have some of these problems if you do this for more than a few years. We understand why. I can walk you through exactly what you're missing in your diet, like how you're going to end up in a really bad state, and it may be permanent. And they do not want to hear it. And so they will say really insulting, horrible things. And then they'll also say, well, they have two kind of fallbacks. One is, well, you're just not doing it right, which is ridiculous. And then the other one is, well, that's never going to happen to me, but if it did, I would still choose to suffer and be unhealthy and die if I have to, rather than let an egg, pass into my pure vegan body. And it's like, I don't actually believe that. I mean, you're not actually going to choose to die over this. But very, very few people are going to follow you down that path anyway. If you're asking people to literally die for this ideology, it's not going to happen. I mean, there has to be something better, right? That's not actually a selling point. Well, you might have to die, but choose this anyway. People aren't going to do it. And that's why most people who take up being a vegan, 3 months is the average. That's as long as they last, is 3 months. And yeah, it doesn't work. You're hungry and you know it. You're exhausted and you know it. You start to have problems right away, most people. Now me, I was so ideological that I overrode all of those signals, but most people actually are a little bit smarter and not as fanatical, and they don't. They give it up. They give it a try. It's kind of a lark, and then they're done because it didn't work. So, I mean, we know it doesn't work.
Why is there so much popularity now, though, with the China study and Caldwell Esselstyn and the son, the firefighter turned nutrition guru? Why is there so much promotion of that? And then they trot out the literature from the Seventh-day Adventists, and they say, hey, these guys, they're vegans, they live forever. I mean, how do we discuss that?
Well, there's a few things. One is, I mean, health has declined in this country. We have so many more diseases, and so much more, larger evidence of it than we did, in my parents' generation, and especially my grandparents' generation. So everybody wants to find out, well, why is there so much more heart disease? Why is there so much more diabetes, more cancer, all of these things? And those answers are sort of complicated. And it's really easy to just smack a simple solution on it. People are afraid. Their loved ones are sick. They want an easy answer. And if, and booksellers will, they'll provide that. Because, obviously, if you'll buy a book, even if it's a $10 book or whatever, $20 book, you'll buy it. You'll buy the ebook, whatever. You'll watch the podcast. But it's an easy solution to say, oh, we'll try this. And if you fall into the wrong, try this, you're going to make it worse before you make it better. But most of us aren't scientists. We're not doctors. And if there's enough kind of, chatter about it across the internet or in the news, you're going to stumble on it. So, like Oprah has, this guru or that diet guru on her show, and 1 million people see it all at once, and they're going to fall for it. They're going to try it, some percentage of them. And it's not for bad reasons. It's because, my husband has heart disease, or my mother has really bad arthritis, or I have diabetes, or whatever it is. You're looking for solutions, you might as well try it, and you'll buy the book. So that's not bad. It's just, we're all looking for answers to this. We're asking for a lot more education to get to a better understanding of why all of this happened. And that's not easy to do in a soundbite society. And that's kind of, we're 2 steps back from where we need to be. So people need to be more literate about reading medical studies. They need to understand human nutrition more, just basic science about our bodies, evolution, where we came from. Once you have a little bit of background on all of that, it actually gets really easy. It's like, oh, we have Paleolithic bodies.
Yeah. Goodness,
shouldn't we be eating Paleolithic foods? And then you can see the difference between a Paleolithic diet and a Neolithic diet, which is vegan in the extreme, is the agricultural diet. But there are some really, really big differences. And then you find out that, oh gosh, in Paleolithic times, so many of these diseases didn't even exist. Like, it's so obviously the diseases of civilization. They're even called that. So this is what happens when human populations take up agriculture. Oh, they end up with all the diseases that we think are now normal. But that's a lot of background for a lot of people to stumble across. You have to really want the information to find it, because you're not going to get it in pop culture. So it's hard. And that's why, what you do is important. What I do is important. Trying to get that basic information out to people, especially people who are desperate and scared, is really important, because we're not really going to get it from the government. They're still on basically the food pyramid thing. They're going to call it my plate or whatever, but it's still, eat a lot of grain. Keep your saturated fat to a minimum, and it's completely the wrong advice. So we're still fighting all of that, even just, on a policy level. And then you have problems like poverty, where, the poverty food right now is going to be cheap carbohydrate. That's what's subsidized by the government. So that's what people are going to eat. If they don't have enough money, they're going to head for bulk calories. And the cheapest thing is like white bread and potato chips. Like, that's just what they're stuck with. And so, of course, they're going to be fat and sick. And, their health is going to decline really rapidly. And so these are some really big political issues, social issues. And education is absolutely key. So, we just have to keep trying to explain to people what's wrong. The thing about the paleo diet or any of these kind of keto diets is that they work so quickly to help people that oftentimes the proof is really just, it happens before your eyes. Within the first week, people feel better and they start losing weight immediately and their joints stop hurting as much. And, you can see right before your eyes, you can see how much better people feel. So, it's, in some ways we are the best advertisement for it because, we show our families and our friends, well, look how much better I am. You can't deny that I got better. So.
Well, certainly. Obviously I love when people make fun of, paleo and they're like, oh, it's just another fad. And I say, by definition, paleo is old Stone Age. It's prehistoric. Like, everything else is just a fad. But obviously, amongst the cardiologists, I'm a pariah for many different reasons, but certainly for the paleo conversation, I'm anti-statin drug, I'm anti-pharmaceuticals, I'm anti-going to the hospital, all that kind of stuff. But certainly on the paleo side. But obviously, as you know, medical doctors get zero training in nutrition. We have no idea what we're talking about unless we open up a book, post-undergrad, frankly, because it doesn't happen when we're in medical school and therefore. Let me say this. I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of vegans that are listening to this, but obviously a lot of people that listen to this know vegans. How do they get out of the vegan cycle? How did you do that? Did you just all of a sudden, and I know I read this in your book, years ago, but did you all of a sudden just devour, a cow? How did you break it?
Honestly, it was probably the hardest day of my life. So 20 years in, I have all kinds of problems. I'm basically half dead at that point. And I went to see a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine, which is completely different kind of medicine than obviously Western medicine. But it was somebody I really respected. He was much older than me. He knew all kinds of, had all kinds of different diagnoses and had dealt with people's spiritual concerns as well. He was somebody who's, I would call, kind of like an elder, I guess. So I came to him as more like a student, like, how can you help me? And I was actually willing to hear what he had to say, because I had certainly had people along the way say, you can't keep doing this. Like, I tried it didn't work. And another one, I tried it didn't work. Even my sister was like, you would feel so much better. She did it for 14 years.
Wow.
Like, the moment that she ate a piece of fish, she was like, Lierre, this isn't going to work. You've got to do this. And I was like, no, I'm not going to be the one who gives up. I don't care. I'm never going to hurt an animal. Blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I went to see this doctor and, he basically took one look at me. It was like, there's nothing here. You're a corpse. What are you doing? He's like, what do you eat? And I said, well, I'm a vegan. He's like, you can't do it. It's not possible. Like, humans can't do it. And I just started crying because it was like, I already knew what he was going to say. And I also couldn't bear to hear it. It was both at once. And it just all came together. Like, he's right. I know he's right. I know I'm going to have to stop doing this. And I have no idea who I am at the end of this conversation, because I was a vegan. That was my identity. Who are you when it all just crumbles? So I was like, well, all right, if he's right, I'm going to try it. I'm going to eat a tuna fish, because I don't have to cook it. I don't have to put it on any of my pure dishes. It really is that level of just like almost OCD. You don't even want it in your house. It feels unclean. It's like this huge taboo. And I was like, well, it doesn't have to touch my dishes. I can eat it with a plastic fork. I don't have to cook it. I'll take one bite and see what happens. So on the way home, I got a can of tuna fish and I did it. And I just took that bite and it all changed. And I was like, he's right. And they've all been right this whole time. And I can't keep doing this. So, I had that, people talk about the meatgasm, like an orgasm. And it was like my entire body was just alive for the first time in 20 years. And I don't have a way to explain that in Western science. I just know a lot of us have had that experience where, they call it qi in the Chinese medicine version, but it's that just base level energy finally getting into my body. And it was amazing. It was like being recharged, in a little plug socket or something. So that was it. There was no turning back, because I could see that he was right, but it was a very, very hard year and a half to do that. So I don't, I have a lot of sympathy for vegans, and I get these emails all the time, people who are very upset, and their bodies are falling apart, and they know they're going to have to do it, and they need somebody to hold their hands. So I do what I can to hold their hands. Like, I know this is a really hard thing, but you'll get your health back if you do it. And then you can explore this whole other world of, well, gosh, maybe agriculture isn't the way forward. Maybe, in fact, there is a way, to get nutrition out of living communities rather than destroying those communities. And we can be participants once again rather than destroying everything. Like, there actually is, another kind of worldview that you can embrace instead, that does honor animals and honors the earth. And, maybe it was all a lie, because animals are dying to feed you no matter what you eat. It's just, I wasn't willing to acknowledge that as a vegan. So, there's a holistic view that you can embrace with this, but it doesn't come easily, and it doesn't come overnight.
How do you honor the animals? I mean, like, do you take it to that level when you're eating? Is there part? I mean, obviously, so many times, I'll speak for myself in our busy household. We don't say grace. We don't acknowledge our food. We don't bless our food. We cook the food and we eat it. Now, we're always doing organic produce. We're always doing free-range grass-fed animals, always. We never, ever, ever, ever veer from that. We always do wild seafood. We never veer from that as well. So is there part of the honoring of the food that you find to be important to you, or not really?
There's, I guess, two parts to that. One is, like what you're saying, I'm very, very conscious about where I'm buying things from. And I go to some extreme lengths to make sure that I am happy with what's being done, that the food is being produced in a way that builds topsoil is absolutely key. And if you just want to boil it down to one thing, that's it. If your food is building topsoil, you can eat it. Because if it's building topsoil, it means there's ruminants on grass. It means that, there's pigs that are roaming through orchards or through forests. It means that the chickens and the ducks and whoever's producing your eggs are out as well, eating on grasses or through woodlands, and, contributing their manure, and being part of a living system, where it's a community where everybody does their part. And that's what builds topsoil, right? You have to have ruminants and grasses together in some way, or trees and animals as well. But it's perennial polycultures. It's a big word, but lots of different plants with animals. That is nature's model. That is every single living community is that. And if you're participating in that, you're doing a really good thing for the planet. You're building topsoil, which means you're also sequestering carbon. So you're helping to stop global warming, which is an amazing thing. Just by buying this food, you can do that. So I'm very, very conscious to support those farms. Also, in terms of human justice, it's a really good thing, because you're supporting a small farmer, not a giant corporation. So every dollar you give to those people is like, they can re-roof the barn, they can put some money away for kids' education, they can buy boots and coats and all that, and the money circulates. Like, we know that replication factor when you buy locally is really important. You're supporting a whole human community with this. So on every level, like, that's what we should all be trying to do. And I know it's not easy. It's not as easy as just going to Safeway. But if you do it, you feel good about it. You can feel like you're really being a participant in all those levels and doing a good thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with this model. It saves the planet, it helps people, it helps you, all of it. The animals have great lives, and that's really good. And then for my own spiritual practice, yes, I do try to be very conscious, really on a moment-to-moment level, that I'm alive and it's a gift and it's amazing, and I'm so thankful that I get to be here and do these things. And I never forget that, the death is involved in every life. No matter what you eat, there are dead animals, there are dead plants, and that I'm going to die too. It doesn't end. Like, I will be recycled back in. And there's the sadness of that moment, and then the joy of that moment, right? There's that bittersweet, we're all going to die, and I'm going to miss my dogs when they're gone, and I'm going to miss my people. But, I'll be part of the foxes and the birds and, the purple needlegrass and whatever's out there, and that's an amazing thing too. So, and I have no idea what happens next. I mean, none of us know, really. Maybe nothing, who knows, but my body will certainly be recycled. So we can celebrate that, because that's life. That's literally what it is. And it's an amazing thing that we get to be here. So we celebrate as long as we can, and it's good. So all of that is sort of, my attitude toward it. And then there's the things that I do that in my own life, I try to support it. But really the most important thing is to explain to other people what's going on, and to try to get engaged in whatever way we can, because these problems are way bigger than any of us are going to solve just by buying the right thing.
I've done probably 45 podcasts so far, and that last little segment you went into there was absolutely beautiful and so poetic. So thank you for that. Once again, just kind of, recognizing where we are in the whole spectrum of the universe and in the earth in general, and recognizing our role and what it is, and yeah, and trying to come up with, with honoring the animal and honoring the vegetables. I mean, because once again, and I say this all the time, why can't a vegan eat an oyster? Does an oyster have any more or less feelings than a head of cabbage? I mean, I don't know. Nobody knows. But honoring all that food is so important. And I don't know, I guess I'll just throw it out there is that we're pretty amazing beings, right? All the things that we can talk about and feel, and how, we've become what we are as human beings, and how complicated the body is. To think it just happened random stance from a bolt of lightning, that happened in a primordial sea a few billion years ago. I don't know. I think there's got to be something more to it. That's me personally. So I am hoping that there is another, our energy, our chi, if you will, assumes another form. And maybe it is just we become, like you said, the plants and the trees and the foxes and stuff like that, or maybe it's something a little more higher level thinking. I don't know. We'll see.
We don't know. I mean, I certainly have had my own experiences, which tells me that there are other realms and other beings who mostly really care about us, but I can't prove that to anyone. It's just an experience I've had. So it's like, it's not even a line in the sand I need to draw. I love talking about it with people who are curious about it and who have had their experiences. It's kind of fun to compare notes. Yeah. And I love reading, for instance, like medieval mystics, because it's like, I get it. I'm not a Christian, but I completely understand. Like, that was my experience too. And it's so interesting just to compare cross-culturally. Like, so I wonder what if this is actually true. But, again, it's like we can't make public policy on it. There's no way to agree to it. You've either had it or you haven't. And, I know how it motivates my life, and that's enough. That's really all I need.
I'm with you. I get it. What, so a vegan trying to crawl out of the vegan hole, is it a matter as far as eating that first, bite of tuna? Is it an egg? And where do you stand on dairy?
Well, I do really great with dairy. In fact, so one of the conditions I have that's permanent is I have degenerative disc disease. So it's 4 levels of my spine. And when I eat really good quality dairy, big fatty dairy, it like dramatically helps my pain level. There's no question. So, I mean, my body really likes it. Now, I'm also of Northern European extraction. So, my ancestors have been eating dairy for a good long time. That is maybe not true for other people on the planet. So I think you have to try it and see how you do with it. Your body will tell you. I mean, you'll know if you're getting sick from it, But it also helps to have really good quality dairy. If you just go to the store and buy what's easily available, you're talking about a substance that humans have never eaten before. It's pasteurized, it's homogenized, and it's from cows who were fed completely the wrong thing. So if you straighten all that out and you're eating grass-fed cows that, and it's not homogenized. I mean, homogenization, people have to understand what it is. They force the milk through a tiny little screen and they break the fat molecules up into really small fat molecules. So these don't exist in nature. Like, nobody has ever eaten this before. And then pasteurizing, there's pros and cons. I get that there were diseases, but if the dairy is clean, raw milk is not an issue. In fact, way more people have gotten sick from eating pasteurized milk than have been gotten sick from eating the raw milk. Because once a bad bacteria enters the milk, once it's been pasteurized, there's no good bacteria to fight it off. So that's a true thing. You can look that up if you don't believe me. But anyway, the thing about raw milk, of course, is that it has enzymes that help us digest it. So a lot of people.
I believe you 1,000%. That's why I get to pick the guests for my show, because they're in total agreement with me. I love it.
Yeah. So you can try it. Like, get really good quality milk. Make sure it's raw, or raw milk cheeses, pasture-raised animals, and then try it and see. And if your body responds in a positive way, you can have it. And if you break out in a rash, or you get all the different things that might happen, stomach ache, whatever, then it's not for you. And you could try goat milk. Sometimes that's easier. But it's worth a try, because it's really, really, it's an amazing substance for humans to eat. If it works for you, go for it. I understand people not wanting to do it too. It's like a judgment, but I find it really, it's yummy, but it's very helpful to my body. So I'm all for it. I also have a cheese factory in my town, so that makes it really easy to get good cheese. So, and I live in a rural area, which I know makes all of this easier. If you live in a city, you really have to travel to get the good food. So I understand that. Yeah, easy for me to say. I live next door to farms, but other people don't have it so easy.
Well, you're based out of California, and California's got pretty, I mean, as far as the laws there, currently, I mean, you never know what the next election is going to bring, but as of right now, it's pretty easy to get raw dairy products in California. They're sold pretty readily. A lot of states, it's highly regulated, slash illegal to do so. And that's for all the reasons of, food corporations obviously restricting our ability to get, quality food for a variety of reasons, to make us sick and to make us, perennial customers and all those kind of things. But, and us, dairy is not paleo. We know that, but I think there is some medicinal value to dairy, and we use it more of a treat. Of course, it's raw. You got to make sure it's from pasture raised animals. I think a lot of, one of the things too that we look at, Lierre, is we make sure that the calf still has an opportunity to nurse off mom for as long as possible, as opposed to, baby's born and now baby goes over there and mom's over here. We try and stay pretty cognizant of that as well.
Yep. And if you can make a personal relationship with a dairy farm, you can find out what their practices are. If you just go to the store and buy what's there, you're not ever going to know. And you kind of have to assume if it's the factory model, that those calves are taken away right away. And we can't really blame farmers for this. They're only getting 12 cents a gallon for milk, and they're paid in bulk. They're not paid for the quality of the milk. They used to get paid by the cream line. So that's why you'll see things like cream line dairy, like that's the name of it. And that's, when you have a bottle of milk, the cream separates to the top, and the cream is really where most of the nutrition is. So the more cream, the more nutritious. So that you would get paid for that. You wouldn't get paid just for producing bulk. And all of that changed, as corporate America took over the food stream. Now they're just paid by the gallon. And so it's mostly water. They have bred these like Frankenstein cows that can produce 20,000 gallons of milk a year. That's insane for this one creature. A traditional cow produces 800 gallons a year, but it's really good quality milk. And the thing to remember about cows, the traditional saying about cows, because there's 4 teats on the udder, is the first teat is for the calf, the second is for the farm, the third is for the neighbors, and the fourth is to sell in town. That's how much extra milk a cow can produce, and that's about right. Like a cow producing this vast quantity, like there's no way there's going to be nutrition in it. But a traditional farm, that's what you're going to have. Like, the baby calf stays with the mom until, the mother says it's time to go, and, it's weaned onto grass, and the life cycle moves on, and everybody's happy. Like, there's no reason to put animals through this, except farmers are desperate. And when they're only getting 12 cents a gallon, they have to produce as much as they can. And that means taking the baby out of the picture. So that's the problem. It's not that farmers are mean. It's that they're under the screws. And the more we can support them to do a better thing, the more of them can come over and do the good thing again, because they don't enjoy taking the calves away either. They're clearly suffering.
Yeah, clearly, voting with your pocketbook, voting with your wallet, and just, supporting that. It was interesting. I was at an event back last summer that I was speaking at in Las Vegas, and there was a politician that was there, and the event had nothing to do with health and wellness. It was an event called Freedom Fest, and it was 5,000 libertarians that gather in Las Vegas, and they said, "Hey, you want to come out and speak about healthcare freedom of choice to 5,000 libertarians?" I said, "Yeah, sure, sign me up." So I go out there and I speak, but before I do, there's a politician who's on, and this politician is from Kentucky, and one of the biggest thing that he was spearheading in all of United States government politics was he was going for raw dairy in the state of Kentucky and across the country. So I found him afterwards. I started talking. It was just very interesting, but it was like, kind of like all this other boring stuff that I don't really care about. And then all of a sudden he starts talking about, raw dairy and bringing that back. Of note, the Wolfsons pay $24 a gallon for raw dairy. And that's about what it's worth. And it makes you really value that. And that's the quality too, right? As you said, the nutrients in that, you can, you can't replace that in conventional milk, not even in a ever. It's impossible.
So I have a little anecdote too. One of the times that I was working locally to try to legalize raw dairy, so of course, you have meetings and various people come and check it out, and what can we do, and do we bring to this town council, or how do we make this happen? And this guy came to a whole bunch of the meetings. It turned out that he himself was lactose intolerant, so he does not even drink milk. He does not eat cheese. but he's a libertarian. And he was just like, on principle, you should be able to buy this. So I'm going to work on this issue. And we were all just so amazed, like, you don't even have a dog in this fight, but it's the principle of the thing. And that's just as important, really.
Well, I mean, and obviously, I mean, yeah, and to him and anybody else, it's just a matter of once we give the government control over that, well, what does the government take control over next? And
I get the principle too. It's important. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, and next thing you know, obviously, grass-fed animals aren't allowed, and you got to vaccinate all the cows and all that kind of crap. So, anywho, are you still friends with that girl from high school who turned you on to veganism?
No, we lost touch a long time ago. But I should ask my sister, because my sister was really her friend. They were in the same grade.
Mm-hmm.
She might have found her on Facebook. I would be curious to know what's happened to her. She was like an absolute wizard violin player, and she had all kinds of talents. I mean, it was a really interesting family all around. She might be up to something really interesting. I should find out what happened to Pilar. Yeah.
Lierre, thank you so much for being on the show. You know, I think in a lot of ways that book must have been pretty cathartic for you, correct?
Yeah, it was definitely my survivor mission. It's like, I need to tell this story because I didn't know what sense to make of it myself. And then I also wanted other teenagers not to do this. I wanted them to understand that they're going to be hearing this from their peers who are very engaged. I want them to stay engaged. I mean, I want them to care about the world. I want them to have questions about what we're doing. All of that is good. You know, compassion and justice and all of this, like, it should be a motivating factor in everything they do. And I want to encourage that. But they're going to be given bad information, and they can make the wrong choice if they don't have full information. So I was thinking especially to those teenagers, like, I want them to hear this before they go off on the wrong path. It's hard to come back once you start down that path. But the other thing was, the people who care the most about the planet don't seem to understand that this is the damage to the planet. It's not a solution. And I really wanted to reach all of them as well. And then the final thing was, I got so tired of having the same conversation over and over. It's like every time I bump into one of these people, it's, oh, here we go again. And we're going to sit here for 2 hours and I will walk you through this. And finally, it was like, I just need to write a book. Because then I can just say, you know what? Read the book. And then we can talk after that. You'll have the same information and then we can debate it. So for all of those reasons, that's why I did it. But yes, I'm very glad that I did it.
Yeah. What, real quick, what do you think about women that are vegan having babies? What does that mean?
It's really hard to get pregnant when you're a vegan. You don't have the right nutrients in your body. You've done nutritional drawdown, essentially. A lot of them are way too thin. So they can't actually conceive. They're not ovulating. Some of them stop menstruating. That was me. I didn't menstruate hardly at all. If I had wanted to have a baby, I don't know how I would have done it. So there's that heartbreak right there. But then the other problem, of course, is that your breast milk is not going to have the nutrients that it needs. The breast milk is only as nutrient dense as your diet is. So if you're only eating vegan foods, it's not going to be there. The vitamin A, the vitamin D, it's the fat. Like, you're just not going to have it, and it's very sad. And then, all of the tremendous, just the horror stories that come across the news of these people, for, I'm assuming, the best of reasons, but trying to feed their infants a vegan diet, and the child ends up dead, brain damaged, blind, deaf, mentally retarded. And even when all those things happen, the parents will not listen, and the grandparents end up having to take the child. And it's just heartbreaking that at that level, it's a cult. I mean, you have to admit, if you're willing to kill your child for an ideological belief of whatever sort, that is a cult. And that's scary to me that it can get that bad. Yeah. I mean, if the child weighs a pound less than when she was born 6 months later and is having full-on seizures, and you still don't go to the emergency room, like, that's a cult. That's horrible. So yeah, these are the things as humans that we need to be very careful of. We are clearly very capable of backing ourselves into ideological corners and believing things that are just not true. We all need to just not let that happen. Like, be very aware in your own mind. Am I being that ideological? Am I closing myself off from reality? And we clearly are very capable of it. So it's always it's a cautionary tale to all of us.
Tell me what's next for Lierre Keith, and how do people find out more about you, and where can people go to get your book?
Sure. Best thing is just go to my website, which is easy. It's lierrekeith.com. And that's kind of a joke because I have a funny name. So you have to be able to spell my name to find my website. The easiest way, honestly, to find it, if you don't feel like looking in the notes, because I'm sure you'll put it in there, if you just type vegetarian myth into any search engine, you will find my book. And that's honestly the easiest way to my website. And then you'll see how to spell my name and you'll find me. And so everything's there. You can buy any other books that I've written. You can look at podcasts and interviews and talks that I've done and see what's coming up next. So that's the easiest route in.
Fantastic, fantastic. It makes me want to reread the book again, but it's like I said, I show it to patients all the time, and I get all these people, cardiology patients that come in from all around the world, and they hear another lip service about going vegan, and they're listening to, the head of the American College of Cardiology, Kim Williams, and all these other, vegan authorities in the cardiology space talking about going, vegan, and they're kind of like, what say you? And I'm like, well, listen, I got my book here. I got Lierre Keith here. I've got, one of my favorite books too is actually available on PDF. It's called The Stone Age Diet from 1975 by Walter Vogelin, who was a GI, specialist, back then. And he was like all carnivore. So, really cool stuff there as well. So Lierre, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being on this episode of the Healthy Heart Show. Her contact info will be in the show notes, but you can Google The Vegetarian Myth. You'll have all the stuff right there. Awesome read, easy read, and there you go. Go paleo. Thank you so much, Lierre. This has been another episode of the Healthy Heart Show. Signing out, Dr. Jack Wolfson, cardiologist.